Hello, today I'm going to talk about cognitive dissonance, but I'm going to start with this question. How much of your belief system comes from your own experience versus what others have told you? I think most people want to help others, maybe not everybody, but most, to wake them up, to get them to see things, especially if it's something that you feel is important. So if you've had this mindset, you know how hard it is to actually do it. Many people don't want help. Many people want to stay inside their psychological prisons. They don't like things disrupting their day to day. They want everything to be tidy and orderly. But that's what I'm going to talk about today. Cognitive dissonance in terms of Gnosticism, magic, our realm, etc. The friction of belief and experience. Cognitive dissonance is the psychological tension of mental discomfort that arises when a person holds two or more conflicting beliefs, values, or perceptions at the same time, or when their actions contradict their beliefs. So the person's mind knows one thing, but their behavior or experience suggests another. And because the brain tries to get order, it needs to resolve the conflict, either by changing beliefs, justifying actions, ignoring evidence, or avoiding the contradiction entirely. In simpler terms, it's the mental stress of being in two opposing realities at once. And it's what makes people resist new information that challenges their worldview. I mean, it's not easy to be in two realities at once. In fact, I'd say it's near impossible. So you present a fact, and the dissonant finds any reason whatsoever to reject the fact because it challenges their worldview. 5 facets of denial. In my experience, I've encountered 5 topics that are especially ripe for this. They trigger cognitive dissonance almost all the time. Number 1, spiritual truths. 2, the existence of magic. 3, the reality of our realm. 4, politics. And 5, diet. Now, there are obviously other topics that this applies to, but I think these are the 5 big ones. Spiritual truths. So many people realize that the soul knows a higher truth, but it's trapped in the demiurge's realm. That tension is a kind of cosmic dissonance. But as far as cognitive dissonance in terms of spirituality, people often show skepticism mixed with caution or curiosity when you reveal some spiritual truth to someone. They will question the claims, sometimes dismiss the person as naive, superstitious, or misled. Reactions can range from amusement or incredulity to discomfort. Concerning the existence of magic, I think people's reactions are often stronger and more polarized than reactions to general spirituality. It takes a certain leap into the unknown, I think. Because of the world religions, we have a structure of spirituality that is in many facets of our life. When it comes to magic, you're sort of stepping outside of that and going into the unknown. Skeptics tend to react with dismissal, ridicule, making fun of the person, treating it as superstition, trickery, or psychological delusion. You hear all these jokes about cult leaders, things like that. But magic is a paradox, and the magician thrives in contradiction, acting as if will can reshape reality while knowing the absurdity of it. When people believe in magic, it's not that they don't understand that it seems absurd. It's that they've transcended that duality and that the contradiction is part of the beauty of it. But it's hard for many people to grasp that. It invites disbelief or fear in those who cling to conventional frameworks. The reality of our realm. This is probably the strongest cognitive dissonance that I've seen. I think this topic is intensely polarizing, and I think ridicule is the number one reaction of going against the accepted upon reality. It's seen as defying obvious scientific evidence, at least the evidence that has been presented in grade schools around the world, as if that is the last word, not to mention a lot of state propaganda. But if you go against that, many respond with frustration or derision, treating the person like they're gullible or conspiratorial. You're one of those conspiracy theorists. How many times have you heard that before? In fact, I think it's infuriating in its predictability and redundancy. I mean, come up with something new. I just wish people could be a little more creative when they're trying to insult a person. But for anybody in the know, it's actually quite disappointing to see how easily the CIA has trained people to parrot this term. It's just ridiculous. They've weaponized the label. It's used to shut down discourse, not just in this category, but in many other categories. But that's a whole other video. Maybe I'll get to it someday. Politics. I'm not really going to give my political views here. That's not really what my channel is about. But I will say they lean into anarcho-capitalism. And I'm sure you can imagine the look on people's faces, the dissonance when I say such a term. But what I've noticed over the years is that people's identities are often tied directly to their political choices. In fact, it might be the biggest determiner of a kind of identity. But as far as dissonance in this case, when new information conflicts with a voter's worldview or party loyalty, it creates discomfort. People often rationalize, ignore, or reinterpret facts rather than change their stance. And I would say this goes for a lot of these things. People just don't want to change their stance even if they are presented with new information. But as far as politics as fuels polarization, it becomes a kind of selective news ingestion. There's tribalism, it amplifies bias and strengthens ideological blind spots. Diet. So after a lot of trial and error, when I'm functioning at 100%, I'm usually doing a carnivore or an animal-based diet. I've gotten a lot of flack over the years for this, especially from vegans. Sorry, vegans. Now, I'm not perfect in my diet. I slip from time to time when friends order a pizza or whatever, but I try to stick to it as much as I can. But one thing I have noticed, having done this, is the eating your vegetables indoctrination is super strong. Despite the fact that there are people that have been carnivores for like 15 years without eating a single vegetable, and they're 10 times healthier than people eating vegetables. So I don't know. But there's this same kind of indoctrination with the food pyramid. It's funny, I know people who complain all the time about their weight, how they feel tired, all these conditions that they have, their aches and pains, all their problems, their health problems. But then I bring up a solution or just something to try and I get more ridicule. It's like, just try it. You know, what would it hurt to try? Take a week, take a few months and see what it does to you. I had a friend a long time ago, and one thing that he instilled in me was this idea of experimentation, and I think it's very important if you want to become a well-rounded person, not just understand yourself, but understand the world. You need to experiment and need to try new things. Some people just will not do it. I guess they say you can lead a horse to water and all that. Break through and you can never go back. So then there's the moment when you confront a contradiction so deep that it shatters your old assumptions. What do you do then? Well, in my mind, it's a fine day because it means that you've mutated, that you've gotten rid of another layer of lies and mistruths that have been thrust upon you that you didn't choose or have consent in. That moment when you can no longer ignore the gap between reality as you've been taught and reality as you directly perceive, that's the sweet spot. And any of you that have gone through it know exactly what I'm talking about. It's difficult, but it's like lancing a boil or something. There is catharsis after it. And then you look back on what you believed before and you're like, how did I ever believe that? It's like, your eyes are just open. In Gnostic terms, it's like the soul glimpsing the pleroma while still trapped in the material realm. The awareness is irreversible. In magic, it's the moment you sense the pliability of reality. Once you felt the power of intention or the uncanny, your old sense of normal loses credibility. Psychologically, it's a form of irreversible cognitive freedom. The mind can no longer settle back into ignorance or denial. And this breakthrough forces transformation. And in my mind, transformation is the name of the game. That's why we're here. The cognitively rigid Heilig. In Gnosticism, there's the idea of the tripartite division. There are 3 groups in most forms of it. The Heilig, which is the material, focuses on the material. The psychic, which is bound to the soul, and it's kind of in the middle. And there's the pneumatic, who is all in spirit and able to transcend to the pleroma. The rigid cognitive dissonant is almost always a Heilig. Closed-minded, stuck in dissonant avoidance. They suppress, rationalize, or deny uncomfortable truths instead of integrating them. You might call them archon-bound. They are tethered to the realm of illusion, unable to glimpse the fullness beyond. The Heilig mind, focused on matter, on surface reality, is imprisoned by the very structure it trusts. Unlike those who endure dissonance and grow, the cognitively rigid Heilig retreats from tension, never stepping into gnosis or magic, and remaining comfortably confined to a world of half-truths and unquestioned question assumptions. And what can you do about it? Some people just don't want to change, and you can't force someone to change. You can present something, and if they reject it, they reject it. There's nothing you can do about it. Quick break here. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Shadow bans are real for this kind of content, so your interaction with the system keeps this channel visible. And if you want to go deeper into Gnostic texts, I got an insider circle where I do deep dives. If you're into music, I've also started a second channel, Christopher of Detroit Music, where I share recommendations and put together top 10 lists with obscure and essential music. Links are below. Now let's get back to it. Some stories. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a few stories about how this happened to me or when I've encountered this. When I first discovered magic, there was this excitement. At first, it was terrifying, but after I got over the initial, terror, I felt elation, this beauty. It was a breath of fresh air. It kind of reinvigorated my life. But the dour reactions soon tempered my enthusiasm. It's a little bit like It's a Wonderful Life when Jimmy Stewart comes back from seeing what his life would have been like. There's this manic kind of, you gotta see, I can't believe it, kind of vibe. A Christmas Carol, same thing. I think when you discover something like magic or gnosis or something, there's this enthusiasm to share, but that enthusiasm is quickly tempered by the reactions people give you. But I think a pivotal moment in my awakening was 9/11, and that was one of the most distinct times where the narrative I was being fed, I didn't buy. The more that I didn't buy it, the more I researched it and wanted to know why I was feeling that way. The more I uncovered, the more I realized that the narrative was completely false. The discovery of magic and the 9/11 incident got me deeper into spirituality. The more I went down these different rabbit holes, the more disbelief I encountered, until I had my realm awakening. And I would say that was a big one. In fact, maybe the biggest one. The first person I tried to explain it to was an ex-girlfriend. We had already broken up, but we were still in contact and stuff, and it was something that just came to me. It was almost an accident, or you could say serendipity, or synchronicity, and I decided to go in deep looking into it. And then after a few weeks, a month, I decided to present it to her because we were close, but nope. She was not having it, and I almost felt like she thought I was going crazy or something. Then I tried explaining it to some friends, same reaction. Even friends that were quite awakened, I think, same reaction. Very close family member that I've known my whole life, nope. But after I ran into all these walls, to be honest, it actually kind of hurt. It was a wake-up call because it made me realize that I had crossed some boundary that other people were not willing to step over. Before that point, I thought that maybe the knowledge that I could show or present, you can either take it or leave it, but it was something that was easier to kind of wrap your head around. This was a fundamental difference in the whole outlook of how people see the world. So it was definitely not easy to explain. I got, angry, a lot of angry people. I've even had people threaten to fight me over it. I'm not kidding. Just crazy stuff. And after a certain point, I stopped talking about it. I'm talking about it here, but it just became this thing where I just didn't want to deal with it. In some of my circle of friends, the word spread, oh, he believes this, and I couldn't escape it because people kept coming up to me. It's like in the Matrix when the Agent Smiths, see the person, they come up, and they kept reacting to me that way. Like, how can, with lots of anger, how can you believe this? How can you be such an idiot? All these things. It was a big wake-up call. Gnosticism and my dietary changes have also been situations where this has happened. The lesson I've learned through all of this is this. The greatest gift you can give to another person is an open mind, to listen to what they have to say. I mean, if they're taking the time to try to connect with you and to give you something, you should at least entertain the idea. That's my thoughts on it. If someone came up to me and said, this, I would listen to them and I'd be like, okay, well, let me look into it, and then we'll see what happens. The irony is, I think people constantly are always like, oh yeah, I have an open mind. I'm very open-minded. But I think the reality is far from it, in my case of experience of what I've seen. But that's all I got for this one. If you've run into this situation and any of these kind of facets of life, you can comment below. Tell me about what you endured or went through. And yeah, that's all I got. Take care. Have a good one.